Welcome to the Legacy Years podcast, where we talk about finding fun, wisdom, and purpose in this next chapter of life. I'm your host, Kristy Osborn with Fairway Home Mortgage, and I specialize in helping people use their home equity as a strategic tool in retirement. And today we're diving into a topic that impacts families far more than most people expect, and that's custodial long-term care. What is it? What it really costs, how to plan for it before it becomes a crisis. Because here's the reality. About 70% of people over the age of 65 will need some form of long-term care in their lifetime. But most families don't have a plan in place. And I see that firsthand. I talk to people every day who are suddenly in the middle of a care situation, trying to figure out how to pay for it, often wishing they had planned sooner and had more options. So to help us really unpack this, I'm joined by Brian Beavers with Beavers Retirement Solutions, who works with families on long-term care planning and funding strategies every day. Our goal today is simple. We want to give you clarity, help you understand your options, and start thinking about how to prepare in a way that protects both you, your finances, and your family. So let's jump in. Welcome to the podcast, Brian.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're sharing your expertise with us today. I've just had a few conversations with you, and your breadth of knowledge on this topic far exceeds mine. So I'm glad that you're here. If you'll start just by telling folks a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So my name is Brian Beavers, and I am with Beavers Retirement Solutions. We focus on Social Security optimization, retirement income planning, and of course, long-term care planning. We have been in business for 14 years, and I feel like long-term care is an area that a lot of people aren't talking about, like you said. So it's an area that I've decided to, take out to the public and really educate people and get the word out, because nobody's talking about this.
Yeah, it's actually a topic that I feel like is becoming a little more commonplace. And that's a good thing, because people need to be talking about this. They need to be thinking about this. So let's kind of dive right into it. Let's talk about what exactly is long-term care and when does someone typically need it?
Yeah. So long-term care is, the vast majority of long-term care is made up of what's called custodial care. And that is non-medical help with daily living activities. So that's your bathing, your dressing, your toileting, your transferring, and just continence issues. And then it goes into cognitive issues as well, like Alzheimer's and dementia. So anytime you need help with those things, that's kind of considered long-term care.
Yeah.
And it can happen, at home, or you can be in an assisted living facility or nursing care. But like you said earlier, depending on which study that you look at, the vast majority of people are going to need some kind of long-term care at some point in their life. So 60 to 70% of us are going to have to deal with this.
Right. I know you mentioned something not a lot of people are talking about. Why do you think that is? Why do you feel like it's overlooked and such a financial risk in retirement for people?
Yeah. Why? I think it's not a fun topic to talk about. It's emotionally uncomfortable to talk about, becoming frail and needing help with daily living activities, getting up and down off the toilet, or needing somebody to help you. It's not a fun topic. So people put that off.
Yeah.
And I think it's also, advisors don't bring this up for different reasons. Maybe it's not a part of their specialty, because I think long-term care really is a specialty that you need to specialize in. So you've got advisors not bringing it up. You've got the population not bringing it up because they don't want to talk about it. So
all right.
I'm talking about it to everybody I talk to.
I do think it's one of those conversations that people avoid because it is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to ask your loved one about those types of things because nobody wants to think about it.
Absolutely.
So I hear this all the time, and most people assume that Medicare is going to cover either some of this cost or all of this cost. Can you clarify what it does and doesn't cover so that people have a real expectation there?
Yeah, the Medicare, this is probably the biggest myth in retirement planning, is that people mistakenly assume that Medicare is going to cover all this stuff, right? And but I tell people Medicare is great insurance. I look forward to it. So, but it doesn't cover long-term care. Medicare, think of it as health insurance. It's going to pay for doctors, hospitals, even some short-term kind of skilled nursing, but it does not pay for the custodial care, which makes up vast majority of long-term care is the daily living activity. So about 70% of long-term care is needing help with those daily living activities. So think
Yeah.
visiting angels, or there's a local company called Right at Home, and it's $25 to $35 an hour for somebody to come out and help you bathe, dress, cook you a meal, pick up your medications. Medicare uh, is great insurance, but it's not going to cover all that stuff. So also important to know, if you have to go to the hospital and then you end up in a skilled nursing, the first 20 days is covered by Medicare, but days 21 through 100, there is a copay. And right now in 2026, it's $217 a day for that copay. So, I mean, if you think about being there for 21 through 100 days, that's over $17,000 just in
Wow.
copays, not covered by Medicare. And then after day 100, you're on your own. So people don't know this. Again, it's just educating the public on how this stuff works.
Yeah. Yeah. You've mentioned some of the costs. That one about skilled nursing facility is crazy, but can you give people a generalization of what real costs of long term care to date are and how that might be changing with inflation over the next 10 to 20 years? How do you plan for something like that?
Yeah, great question. So the cost is astronomical, and with everybody I meet with, I show them the survey, and there you can go to the company's called Genworth. They do a survey nationwide every year. You can go to carescout.com and
Mm.
click on cost of care survey. Okay, and you can pull up by city what's the cost of care in your area. So I'll just read you a couple of the statistics. But for home health care, again, think visiting angels or right at home, come out, help you with your daily living activities, $75,000 a year right now. And then 20 years from now, $140,000 a year. Assisted living, $72,000 a year right now, $133,000 20 years from now. And then nursing home care, $100,000 for a private room right now, today, if you need to go in a nursing home. And then it's projected to be $187,000 by 2046.
Wow.
So it's basically just outpacing inflation a little bit, but people don't realize how expensive this stuff is until, they wait too late and all of a sudden it's like, how am I going to pay for this?
Right. So, right now, when care is needed, who typically ends up providing that care? And how do you see families that you work with making those decisions? I know you've mentioned a couple of the companies, but that's not always something people can afford.
Right. Yeah. And so what ends up happening is, excuse me, about 70 to 80% of long-term care is provided by family members. So think of it as unpaid care is another way, unpaid caregivers.
Yeah.
But, and it's a huge burden, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But the first call usually goes to the closest living adult child. So it comes down to geography sometimes as who's going to help take care of mom or dad if they become frail. And then, of course, there's financially, you're going to have to liquidate something. So I always ask people, uh, if something like this happened, a long-term care event happened, how would you pay for it? What asset would you liquidate first? And so that kind of gets that, you start thinking about it
Right.
like, well, I may have to actually sell something to help pay for this nursing home that costs $100,000 a year.
When you think about the financial and emotional toll on people, not just dealing with that situation, but what about when there's no plan in place and they're not only dealing with now mom or dad are hurt or need that additional care, but now we've got this financial burden. I can't imagine the toll on families.
Yeah. It's real. The emotional side rarely gets talked about, but caregivers often have a lot of guilt and grief, exhaustion and resentment around,
Yeah.
even with somebody that they love dearly, having 24/7 to be on call basically to take care of them at their worst moment. You're helping them toilet and dress and bathe. That's tough. And then the person
Yeah.
receiving the care, they often feel like they're a burden. So, just it's so important to have a plan, even if it's just talking through with your family about, God forbid,
Mhm.
if something happened, how would we address this as a family? Who would somebody have to quit their job or go part-time to help start taking care of mom or dad?
I've been through this twice already in my lifetime. So if you think it's not going to touch you, you're wrong. And with one family member, there was a great financial plan in place, and it was not a large burden on the family. And in the other case, there was no plan in place, and literally months of my life just splitting my time between my house and her house, and that was the reality of the situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
At what age do you think someone should realistically start planning for long term care? And what might happen if someone waits too long?
You know, the typical age of somebody purchasing a long-term care policy is about 60, 61. And, we're starting to see people younger start looking at this. But
Mhm.
I would say between the ages of 55 to 65 is kind of the sweet spot. You still have your health typically because there is some underwriting involved to get a long-term care plan. So as long as you're still relatively healthy, and we can help people all the way into their 70s and even the 80s, but I would say the options become more limited once you get past the age of 80.
Sure.
So, and you do have to be somewhat healthy, like you can't have active Alzheimer's or dementia typically and get a policy. Although there is one company that they have a guaranteed issue product. So even if you have some health issues, we can still get you a plan as long as you're not past the age of 80. So,
Wow. And that's where it helps to have an expert because you know those things where somebody else might not.
yep. And I would
What
also
are,
I would also
oh,
add,
go ahead.
having somebody that's a specialist because you can dabble in this, but man, there's so much to know about it. You kind of have to go deep to understand all there is to know about it. And also, as an independent, I work with all the different companies, so I'm going to come from a more holistic planning standpoint where,
Right.
it doesn't matter to me which option that you go with. I'm just going to present you all the options and kind of let you pick what makes the most sense for your situation.
Yeah. And I think that leads directly into the next question I was going to ask you, which are what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see families make when care needs come up unexpectedly?
Yeah, I mean, some of the mistakes are waiting too long. If you wait till a crisis happens, then you're out of options, right? So it's like my earlier question: what asset are you going to liquidate first to help pay for care? And then your business, you mentioned, home equity conversion mortgages, reverse mortgages is an excellent
Yeah.
way to help tap into some of that kind of, idle money that's sitting there. It's not really doing anything, but it's a great, powerful asset that people can utilize to help pay for care. But it's much better to do that planning ahead of time versus
Yeah.
after an event happens. So, just planning early versus planning late and just bringing up the conversation with your family. That is so important. You've started the planning process right there.
So let's talk about that. So let's talk about how people are funding long term care. What are their options? What are you seeing? What are you presenting to your clients?
Yeah. So again, the home equity conversion mortgage is an amazing product. It's come a long way, just like long term care plans have come a long way. So other funding options are, you know, a lot of people I meet with say, I'm going to self fund, right? Meaning I'm going to
Yeah.
set aside a bucket of money or a portion of money, portion of my portfolio. If something ever happens, then I know I've got that money set aside, right? And really, not a lot of people will even have that as a plan, but they'll say that if I ask them about it. But what I say to that is if you're self insuring, why not self insure with an insurance company? And what I mean by that is you can reposition those assets with an insurance company. And so I always use $100,000 for easy math. You take $100,000 that you have set aside for the purposes of long term care, reposition that with an insurance company. Now that 100,000 can become two, three, four, even $500,000 for the
Right.
purposes of long-term care. So it gives you tremendous leverage and you're basically using the insurance company's money to help pay for care at that point. And then with these newer plans, the hybrid plans is what we call it. It's not use it or lose it like the old school long-term care. So
Okay.
if you pass away and you never had a long-term care event, then your family's going to get a death benefit. And a lot of times they can get back all the original money that you put into the policy. So it's not use it or lose it. It's a win-win. Your family gets paid if you never need care, but if you do need care, now you've got some tremendous leverage to help pay for that care that we know is going to be astronomical and potentially wipe you out financially.
That's smart. It's a insurance policy within an insurance policy.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Okay, so let's talk about Medicaid because a lot of people say, well, I'll just, use Medicaid. Realistically, what role does Medicaid play and what trade-offs should people really realize are there when when they say that and they're like, "Oh, that's my fallback plan."
Yeah. So I'll just preface this by saying I'm not an expert on Medicaid, and it really is a specialty unto itself. And so I would ultimately defer to like an elder law attorney or somebody that specializes in that to ask them. But generally speaking, we know that to qualify for Medicaid, you have to spend down your assets to really near poverty levels.
Right.
In most states, it's about $2,000 that you can keep in assets. And then there's some other rules around the home and stuff that you can speak to. But the spend down process is going to wipe out your savings. So you got to spend that first before the state will start taking care of you. And then, as far as the level of care, you're talking about a nursing home, and it's not going to be the highest level of care. It's
Right.
really a sad situation.
Yeah.
So if you can prevent that by just having a plan in place, it's going to give you so much peace of mind being able to not have to depend on the government. So Medicaid
Right.
it's a safety net that's there, but it's, if you can avoid it, you want to avoid that.
Yeah. And I do know, there's look back periods. And I know I came from the title industry, and I know if we had an estate we were dealing with, we did have to see if there was monies that were due to Medicaid, if that had been
That's right.
something that families had. Yeah. So there is some payback there that impacts your family and your estate. So I
Absolutely.
did do an episode on Medicaid. If you guys are interested in it, you can go find it. It's definitely here on the site. So yeah. Let's talk about how that long-term care plan should coordinate within an overall retirement strategy, because it's not the only thing that people have to worry about.
Yeah. So, my process is I'm helping people optimize their social security. So that's kind of the first thing that we look at, because that's really like a foundational asset that's going to set the tone for the rest of their retirement, right? So it's something that
Yep.
you can depend on for the most part. We think social security is going to be around. So it's a guaranteed check with, cost of living adjustments. So we start there, and then we'll look at their other retirement assets. Do they have 401ks? Do they have other significant savings that they're going to utilize? And then we kind of look at, you know, longevity risk. Do you have longevity in your family? Could you potentially live a long time? And if you are potentially going to live a long time, then as we know, 70% of us 65 and older are going to need some type of long-term care.
Right.
So I truly believe that no retirement plan is complete without discussing long-term care or having a plan in place. So that's a big portion of my planning, is what happens if an event happens, how are you going to pay for that? And then is there a way that we can kind of help mitigate that risk with long-term care insurance? So that's really something that everybody's focused on, market risk in their
Yeah.
portfolios and sequence of returns risk. But if you think about it, $100,000 room in a nursing home for 5 years, that's $500,000.
Yeah.
Most people don't have $500,000 laying around. So
Yeah.
I would kind of maintain that that may be a bigger risk than the market dropping 20%. You know what I mean? Like you should
Right.
be concerned about this risk as much as the market risk, right?
Right.
So,
And yeah. Yeah.
so yeah,
And if you're
that's,
thinking like dementia or Alzheimer's, if you think about the level of care
oh,
that someone needs in that situation, a lot of times that's the only solution, is some type of living outside of the home
yeah,
where there's
it's memory
24/7.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the most expensive level of care that you can get. And like you said, Alzheimer's, people last a lot longer with Alzheimer's,
Hmm.
typically 8 to 10 years. So
Hmm.
you're talking about potentially being in a facility for a long time, and memory care is even more expensive than nursing home care. So it can become astronomical, and literally it can wipe you out financially if you don't have a plan.
So let's talk about the difference between single and married. Is there a difference when you think about long-term care planning, and what are your thoughts when you're dealing with a client who might be single versus a client who's married?
Yeah, this is a big one. And so I would say that somebody that's single probably should be more concerned about long term care than married couples. And there's a lot of reasons why. But if you think about, if you're single, you may have less family to lean on in a
Right.
crisis, right? So if you don't, not only financially, but emotionally, if you're just alone, just dealing with that whole process is going to be a lot more impactful. So I think for single people, it's even more important to have some kind of plan in place. You should definitely consult and have your powers of attorney and all that stuff to help if decisions need to be made. You can't lean on a spouse, or, you don't really have somebody there to help pay. I'm sorry, to
Right.
help talk about that. So
Right.
yeah,
I
and
I I
go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I do find that, is a struggle when I talk with my clients, if they're single, not having someone to talk with about things is something that they struggle with. It's a
Yeah.
lonely feeling.
Yeah, that emotional component, there's really
Mhm.
you don't have a primary advocate in your corner. You're really your own decision maker. So, and what I was going to say is, I think when I meet with people that are single, they get it and they understand it more because they know that there's nobody there, kind of as a safety net. It's all
You're
up to
right.
them. So, yeah, very important for single people to plan for this.
This next question may be a little self serving, but let's talk about how home equity can fit into long term care planning. And do you see that as something that can be a consideration?
Yeah, 100%. The home equity is for a lot of people, it's their only asset that really they have. Being able to, if they have it, either paid for or mostly paid for, it's a powerful asset that people can tap into, that they can use to not only pay for long-term care, but just have as a backstop if something, maybe they need to pay for a new roof or some repairs on their home or car repairs. If they don't have a lot of assets, that may be the only way they can do it. So again, we always talk about having a plan, but having
Right.
that conversation before it gets too late, before, emergencies happen, they can talk to you and learn how to tap into that equity. And it's tax advantage. There's a lot of great things that you can talk about. I know you talk about all the time, but I find that is for a lot of people that don't have a lot of assets, that may be one of their only options or one of their best options.
I do think it's important that when we think about our retirement, and as I think about my retirement, that we look at the whole picture, every asset that we have, and all of the risks. And I know that's hard. It's hard to think about all of the risks because, we don't know what they all are
Right.
potentially. But why do you think it is that that advisors, some advisors, I do think it's getting better, but are not mentioning that long term care portion of it?
Yeah. Again, I think it goes back to, it's a hard conversation. Nobody wants to talk about disability or being dependent on someone else. And again, it's a specialty. So to know everything there is to know about long-term care, I think you need to have a certification. You need to go deep on
Yeah.
this topic. And then, it's a lot of this to me is like, I'm educating people because a lot of people, they know they need it, but they don't move forward with it. But at least I've educated them and now they kind of have an idea of what to do if something happens. But I think some advisors just feel like it's outside their lanes.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about insurance, or they stay in their lane, and I get it. They've got a lot of compliance and things to deal with. So it's just another avenue that they'd have to spend a lot of time
Hmm.
getting up to speed on. But, to be fair, clients don't bring this up either. Back
Right.
to the Medicare, they assume that that's going to handle everything, and it doesn't. So, like I
Hmm.
said, I've made a deliberate choice to kind of make this a primary focus of my practice, to educate people, and I truly feel like no retirement plan is complete without having a discussion about long term care and at
Yeah.
least educating people on that.
Yeah. I think people are probably scared to, will I qualify? What's it going to cost me? Why should I even talk about it? Because I can't afford it, that kind of thing. So I
Right.
do hope that people will, I mean, there's no harm and no cost in having a conversation. So people need to do a better job of finding out, like asking the questions.
Yeah. And up to that point, I will say this, there's what I always tell people is something's better than nothing. And literally there's not a one size fits all. So it literally can be, from a short term care plan that'll cover you for a year up to a long term care that will cover you for the rest of your life, even if you have Alzheimer's for 20 years. There's a vast majority of in between and all of the above. So we can find a plan for you that will fit your budget. Typically, most people, there's something that we can do, but just it's every situation's different.
Yeah. I think that's great to know. What's the one thing that you wish every retiree knew about long term care before they retired?
But the one thing that I wish they knew is that Medicare will not cover your long term care.
We can't say that enough.
I mean, I'm just going to beat that horse, but
Yeah.
it's, I think I just hear that all the time. Like, people think, oh, I thought Medicare would cover that. So you can
Mhm.
get blindsided when something happens. And I've seen it. Everybody knows somebody that's been affected by this, right? I've seen it with my own family. My mother was in a skilled nursing facility. She broke her femur. She slipped and fell in my garage and broke her
Yikes.
the largest bone in your body. And she was in a nursing facility, skilled nursing, for about 6 weeks. And so we learned about, copays, and after days 20, you have to pay this copay. And
Mm.
then thank goodness she hasn't been in a nursing home, but my uncle recently passed away and he had Alzheimer's for 10 years. So he was in and out of nursing homes. During that time, he fell and broke his hip. So
Oh, gosh.
my aunt and my cousins took turns taking care of him until they couldn't take care of him anymore. And then they learned real quick that this nursing home is not covered by Medicare.
Mm.
And they live in East Texas, which has some of the least expensive nursing home care in the country. It's like $5,000-6,000 a month. But still, if you have a plan for that, that's a lot of money, right?
It's
Here in Dallas,
yeah,
it's more
yeah.
like 7 or 8,000 a month. So I think just that's the biggest thing is assuming that it's going to be covered by Medicare or something, and then waiting too long to look into options. We talked about that a few times, but you know,
Right.
don't wait till it's too late. Have the conversation. The best time to have the conversation was 10 years ago, but the second best time is right now today. Let's have that conversation in advance so everyone has, a plan and what happens. What do we do if something were to happen?
Right. So if somebody wanted to have a conversation like that, what would be their first step? If they're like, "Oh, I want to know more. I'm interested." What would be their first step in finding out?
Well, they can call me for sure. And I would be happy to give them a free consultation on that. But there's a ton of resources online, that you can do some research on as well. It's easy to do some research online with ChatGPT, YouTube, Google, but then reach out to me.
Okay. And I'll put your contact information in the description so folks can find you. I always ask my guests if there's anything that you wish we had covered or that you wished I had asked that we missed. And maybe there's not, but maybe there is. If there's anything else you want to leave the audience with.
Well, I won't beat the dead horse again that Medicare doesn't cover custodial long-term care, but I mean, really, I think we've gone pretty deep, and you've had some great questions, and again, I feel like I'm on a mission here, but not enough people are talking about this, so just have the conversation.
Yeah.
Make sure that you talk to your family, and if that's all there is, then at least you have a plan on who may have to take off work or make adjustments or move back to town, because having a plan is better than no plan.
Yeah. I like that. Well, thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate your information today. Thank you for joining us. I do hope that people will reach out to you, and I hope that people will listen and that they'll find out, do my parents have a plan? I think that's, as adult children, we need to be helping our parents and making sure that they have the resources that they need.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was great.